It is now hour number 2 of the fastest 2 hours in talk radio, the Vinnie Eastwood Show, broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com 5 days a week, Monday through Friday in the United States, 5 till 7 Central, that's 6 till 8 Eastern, 3 till 5 Pacific, and in New Zealand it is Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. till midday, until we have daylight savings, then it's like 11 a.m. till like 1, and then we have daylight savings again in the United States, and it becomes like midday till 2 p.m. Over the summertime. So yeah, it's pretty confusing if you're in New Zealand, but if you're in the States, nothing ever changes. Kind of like the ruthless amount of criminal scumbaggery that is running the country and keeps getting freaking elected by all the stupid idiots who think that their votes actually matter, when they're probably just, you know, for lack of a better term, demonic representations of humanity, in my considered opinion. Not to say that they're all demons and everything, but if they were, they'd certainly be acting pretty similarly. Okay, and my very special guest is Rosemary Guiley, and we are talking about the Djinn. And speaking of which, her websites are visionaryliving.com and djinnuniverse.com. Now, the topic I wanted to get into, starting off the second hour, is a gin and tonic. Is there some kind of a tonic that you can take to prevent yourself from becoming possessed or attacked or stalked by the Djinn?
There are lots of remedies, but not all of them work for everyone in all situations. And so I polled a lot of experts and a lot of experiencers, and I experimented with a lot of things myself in the cases that I've investigated myself, to see what seems to work the best. And there are a number of fronts that can be approached. One is a host of remedies that really deal with a lot of the supernatural phenomenon, just getting the energy, breaking up the energy that makes it difficult for them to manifest in our dimension. They have to come into our dimension from another realm, and we don't really understand or even know all of the conditions that exist for that to happen. There are certain places around the planet where that seems to be easier than others. But breaking up that energy can make it much harder for them to actually be present here. So old remedies, things like iron. The iron weakens many spirits, including negative spirits. It's been a time-honored remedy against fairies as well. But placing iron around the outside of a home or in a room, if you're having a lot of bedroom visitations, it can be very helpful. The use of the Seal of Solomon as a personal amulet has worked for some. People have talked quite a bit about prayer, and once again, there are no uniformities. People will swear by things like the Lord's Prayer. For other people, it does not work a bit for them. For people in the middle, it works for a while, then doesn't work. So prayer can be effective. All these things can be effective, but they may not last. The use of willpower, that is what we call righteous anger and willpower. And this seems to be the most effective for people who are having repeated attacks and contacts. Not everyone is plagued consistently for long periods of time. They may only have a few interactions. But this seems to be the most effective, that at some point the chronic victim needs to find some sort of internal power, which is a combination of your own directed and focused will, your connection to whatever your spiritual center is, the strength that you feel you draw on from the realm of the divine, and combining that to create some sort of force field that prevents the entities from having attachments or close contact. And this has been discussed quite a bit in the abduction literature. And abductees have gone through the same sorts of things, like how do I stop these, and they try many things and don't work. And the ones who get the best relief find this inner power. People who are engaged in some sort of spiritual practice, a sense of a connection to the spiritual realms, a practice of prayer and meditation. It's sort of like going to the spiritual gym. You increase the buffer around you.
What about animals? The Egyptians believed that cats were like the guardians of the underworld, and if you want to be protected from dark entities, you'd have a cat near you.
Well, in Djinn lore, it said that the Djinn do not like wolves, but I have not encountered much in modern practices where images or some sort of wolf totems are used, as a prophylactic against them. In fact, I think that they account for some of these shape-shifted forms of dogmen and wolfmen that are out there. So there are certain prayers in a variety of religions that are said to be effective. Folklore from the Middle Eastern world is full of remedies, spiritualized water, spiritualized foods, things that we find in our folklore here about ways to keep negative things out. But fundamentally, the bottom line is, I believe, finding something within yourself. Anne Druffel, a well-known ufologist, and others have called it sovereignty. I think that's a good term for it. The sovereignty of the individual not to be violated in certain ways. And this here again is very new territory for most human beings. And so we have a very poor idea of what the rules of engagement are, if there are any.
Well, if that's the case, then surely we haven't solved or even fully understood this phenomenon yet. And one's got to ask, is there an end game to all of this, either on the human side or on the Djinn side or whatever?
The big end game would be the faction that really wants to have domination in this realm again, in our physical reality. And there are researchers who feel that is a very significant threat. How long a time frame it's going to play out is anybody's guess, because here again we're dealing with entities that are not operating on earthier timescales. People have criticized the whole abduction scenario, the ET abduction scenario, by saying, well, if these entities are so smart, why do they keep abducting people? It just seems to be the same thing over and over again. So this sounds like mass hysteria or mass fantasy. But if you look at it from a different timescape, then things make more sense in terms of why over perhaps an entire human lifetime the same sort of thing might be taking place in terms of interactions with the entities. So that would be the big agenda. But then there are lots of smaller agendas. Just like you would say, well, it's the neighborhood thug, just trying to, further his own gains. And there are plenty of people, human beings, who have those motives too. They're not participating in any global scheme of any sort. They're just trying to look out for themselves. So none of this really bodes well for human beings. That if we have more incursions of even just the low-level tricksters, it threatens to have a very long-term deteriorating effect on people. These sorts of things can wear down people's willpower, their resolve, their health, their ability to be productive, and their ability to pursue their spiritual growth as well. So even at the low end of things, we should... You know
what was very funny when you were just listing all those characteristics that they're trying to hold back? I was like, well, it sounds exactly like the government.
Well, there are many people who would be willing to consider that these entities are in league with certain conspiracy elements, certain oppressive government elements, and it can't be ruled out. I do not know what the extent of that might be. I think that we have just scratched the surface on what's going on. And in the 2 books that I've done on the Djinn, this is just like taking the first lid off things. My feeling is that things go much, much deeper. And in fact, even when I started out in my research, I did not expect things to spread in so many directions. And it's like something having infiltrated every possible thing you can think of. And
how deep do you theorize that it might be going? I mean, hypothetically.
They may very well be able to manipulate us in ways that we're not even aware. One of the things that I get into in the Djinn Connection is reevaluating our old myths and stories about our engagements with ancient aliens and visiting beings. We have stories about supernaturally empowered beings, visitors from the sky. They come and teach people things. They seed civilization. And these beings seem to have a purpose for doing that. Some of them, it's a very self-serving purpose, like the Anunnaki, genetically manipulating people so that they become better workers and slaves. The Watchers, who cohabit with human beings and create the Nephilim, who spread corruption on the land. The Archons, who are these like false gods who want to use humanity for their own ends. We have these stories over and over again in our mythologies, and a lot of them show what I call the footprints of the Djinn. You could see the hand of the Djinn in there. Whether or not the Djinn account for 100% of all of them, I don't think we can go there yet. But the Djinn could very well have had a hand in human affairs from the very beginning.
So they could be one of the progenitors of our very species.
They have, according to ancient lore, intermingled genetically with human beings. They are capable of having children with human beings, having hybrid children. And even in the days of King Solomon, these sorts of hybrids were feared because they would have the powers of the Djinn and the characteristics and traits of the human being. So they could insinuate themselves in human society, but yet they could be very dangerous, like loose cannons. We have the abducting ETs who are said to be creating hybrids with us. We have reptoid entities that are half human and half reptilian. We have fairies who create hybrids with people. It's deeply embedded in our supernatural lore for human beings to be mixing genetics with all kinds of things.
Well, it's kind of like I found that part of the human experience is attempting to break into other dimensions, like in the spirit of exploration, as it were. Always trying to do new things, go places we've never been able to get to before, and this massive quantity of curiosity and creativity that is inherent in being human, I think, is really the thing that really kind of facilitates this and makes almost anything possible, and within the realms of almost certitude, that there's really a hell of a lot going on within the human race that most humans are simply not aware of, because our ability to create things and our collective curiosity has been, in my opinion, deliberately dampened in no small part by mainstream media, so that if anybody ever experiences anything fully creative or fully outside of the realms of alleged normality, it's simply written off now as crazy and not listened to at all.
You know, we have so much potential, and yes, I think more than ever we're being channeled and manipulated, and I think we're running the risk of becoming very dulled that way. And some of these scenarios that you can extrapolate from just the small amount of evidence we have for these kinds of interactions, they become very scary. You have to start entertaining ideas like, does the Matrix, a la, the films, does that kind of reality really exist? Is everything just some sort of artificially manipulated reality to keep us complacent so that we perform some other kind of function for some parasitic or, dominating entity or presence?
Well, if it doesn't literally exist, it certainly figuratively exists. There's umpteen million methods of distraction to keep people slaves and just keep putting their energy into powering the system that dominates them.
Well, all the advances in technology that we have, which are so wonderful on one hand, they do encourage us to think less, to be less creative, because something else will do it for us. And I'm very alarmed by the increasingly shortened attention spans that human beings have, because
I can't talk to people for like 12 seconds before they switch off. Oh. Have you noticed that? Some people's eyes just glaze over within only a few seconds. Like that's as far as they can hold their attention for.
The visual media that that's in our diet, so to speak, on television and in films, it's geared toward rapid movement, rapid change. Going to a film, for example, with any sort of sustained dialogue in it is a rarity these days. And we have generations now of young people who have their faces in their cell phones all the time. They can't do anything without consulting their cell phone every few seconds.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Whole lot of friends together at a table. They're only looking at their cell phones. We'll be right back. Kind of like the ruthless amount of criminal scumbaggery that is running the country and keeps getting frickin' elected by all the stupid idiots who think that their votes actually matter when they're probably just, for lack of a better term, demonic representations of humanity, in my considered opinion. Not to say that they're all demons and everything, but if they were... The topic I wanted to get into, starting off the second hour, is a gin and tonic. Is there some kind of a tonic that you can take to prevent yourself from becoming possessed or attacked or stalked by the Djinn?
There are lots of remedies, but not all of them work for everyone.
6 till 8 Eastern, 3 till 5 Pacific. And in New Zealand, it is Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. till midday, until we have daylight savings. Then it's like 11 a.m. till like 1, and then we have daylight savings again in the United States, and it becomes like midday till 2 p.m. Over the summertime. So yeah, it's pretty confusing if you're in New Zealand, but if you're in the States, nothing ever changes. It is now hour number 2 of the fastest 2 hours in talk radio, the Vinnie Eastwood Show, broadcasting live on AmericanFreedomRadio.com 5 days a week, Monday through Friday in the United States, 5 till 7 Central. They'd certainly be acting pretty similarly. Okay, and my very special guest is Rosemary Guiley, and we are talking about the Djinn. And speaking of which, her websites are visionaryliving.com and djinnuniverse.com. Now,